This is Autumn Bates. She's a clinical nutritionist with a master's in nutrition and human performance.
Got it.
Okay? The woman's legit. And before us, because it's a drinking show, so we have to tie alcohol in, this is a classic sangria. So I use apples, I use orange slices, grapes, some lime slices, added in some brandy, then brought in some red wine, followed red wine up with some lemon lime soda, and here we are, okay? Yeah, cheers, okay?
Cheers.
Okay, let me just take a little sip. Okay.
My favorite.
Because you like red wine, right?
I love it, yeah.
So we could even start there. What should we drink if we don't want to get fat, but you still want to drink?
Right. So really the more simple you can get, the better. So when, with the, let's say red wine, for example, it's going to be fairly low in sugar when compared to, let's say a cocktail. So you just want to keep it lower in sugar, as much as possible. So if you're having hard alcohol, then you could keep it, where you just have it with soda water and lime, and that'd be the most simple way to go about it. I'm sure you could probably come up with a more creative way.
That's the thing. Avoiding sugar is tough because everything is, all the syrups have sugar in it.
Right.
All the mixers have sugar in it.
Right.
And if you go kind of sugar-free, you end up with a sort of bland drink.
Right.
So, you said any particular kind of red wine, though?
So there's a lot of research on dry farm. So dry farm is just a method of farming. It's more of the old world type of farming where they just don't use irrigation. So in general, it's going to be lower in sugar. So inherently, the actual red wine will be lower in sugar if it is dry farmed. So a lot of Italian wines, but you can even find dry farm certified red wines. But going back to your point on what you're saying on, sugar helps make it taste better. Just like with sangria, you can add in natural types of sugars that are going to be lower in sugar.
Like a stevia?
Or even just like how you did with a bunch of fruit. There's stevia, there's erythritol, all of these different types of sugar alcohols, which technically don't really raise your blood sugar, but there's a lot of gut irritation that can come with it. So it's
stevia is not necessarily a good thing.
It really depends on the person. So some people love it and they do well with it. My biggest thing with it is if you are trying to reduce sugar, it's just going to further increase sugar cravings because you're still getting that stimulus of sugar.
I saw an article that said that, first, you shouldn't really drink, but if you are going to go drinking, definitely have a meal before you go out. Do you agree with that? Because they said that would then slow the release of alcohol into the bloodstream.
Yeah.
You agree with that?
That's another one where it's sort of a mixed bag. It really depends on who you're talking to. I think it is a good idea just because then you're less likely to drink excessively because you are drinking, after your meal, so you're full. If you're drinking before your meal, you're more likely also to keep drinking and have a lot more, and it's going to hit your system faster. But then there's an argument that if you drink, after your meal, it's going to, like what you're saying, slow down the release and make it more difficult to process. So I would recommend just having it with or after your meal, just so you don't, excessively drink, but you still get to enjoy your drink.
You always see this thing where they said, alcohol, like a glass of wine a day is great for you.
Yeah.
Now, I know the liquor industry, and that sounded to me like straight liquor industry propaganda, okay?
Yeah.
Because these dudes want you to drink. So do you agree a glass of wine every day is good for you?
So this actually ties in really great with the Mediterranean diet because they actually do promote wine drinking there. When I studied the Mediterranean diet in Italy, and that was one of the pillars. So they would talk about how red wines, particularly red wine.
What is the Mediterranean diet?
Simplest way to say it is how they eat in the Mediterranean, but it's really going to be higher fat, have more of a plant-based emphasis with some moderate amount of meats and animal-based proteins too. But they do also include red wine, so that's one key component of the Mediterranean diet.
Every day?
It's over there, yeah.
Okay, but forget the Mediterranean diet. We're in America, so should I be having a glass of wine a day, or that's bad?
I'd recommend, it depends on your goals.
This is an Autumn Bates diet we're looking at here now.
It depends on your goals. So if you're looking for weight loss, if you have a glass of wine every day, that's definitely not going to help it. But if you are at a weight that you're comfortable with, then a glass of wine, especially if it's going to be a lower sugar one, like a dry farm, and it's a true, glass of wine where it's about 5 ounces, not maybe the ones, have you seen those, the wines that are like a whole liter of wine?
See, here's why I said it's liquor industry propaganda, right? It's because nobody has a glass of wine. The minute you open the bottle, the first thing they can tell you, that's going to go bad, Scott. You can't just put that. You can't just have a glass and leave it in the fridge.
That's true.
It's going to
That's
turn
true.
on you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got to drink that. Okay. So there's no such thing as a glass of wine. That's how I know there's a liquor and there's some propaganda in there. Okay.
Probably a bit of that too. Have you seen? But they have those things where you can pull the air out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what do you feel about that?
Yeah, but once you have a glass, I mean, nobody has a glass. You
Yeah.
just it's
Unless
humanly
you have 4
impossible.
people
Yeah,
with you,
you can't do that.
yeah.
It's impossible. It's not humanly possible.
Are you speaking from personal experience?
Yeah, I can't have a glass. I barely could have a bottle of vodka. You know what I mean? Because the vodka could go bad. It does spoil, by the way. Okay, so how I found you, and the real reason for our conversation is this trend right now called intermittent fasting. Okay, I just messed up my fast right now with that little sip of this. Explain to the audience what intermittent fasting is.
Intermittent fasting, it's a deceivingly simple concept. So basically it's where you're just not eating all day. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. There's a 16-8 method where you're the most common method.
Explain that, because that's the one I'm doing right now. Okay.
Oh, you're doing it?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know that. So it's where you're fasting for 16 hours and then you eat during that 8-hour period. So everyone's window will change on when they eat depending on their schedule. Mine, for example, is 10:30 to 6:30 because I go to bed at like 8:30, so that makes sense for me. Where some people might be like 12 to 8, or some people have night shifts, so it's going to be different for them.
Yeah,
but
I do 12 to 8. Okay,
yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong, okay? Because I don't want mansplain with a clinic. She qualified, okay? My understanding is they had 2 groups of rats. Okay? And they fed them the exact same unhealthy diet. But with this group of rats, they fed them around the clock. The way we typically eat, you wake up, have breakfast, blah, blah, and you snack all throughout the day until you go to bed. But with this diet, with this group of rats, they crunched it into an 8-hour period. And then they found out that the rats that ate only within an 8-hour period were, I guess, like 20-30% healthier than the other group of rats.
Yeah. So one of the main explanations for this is really because when every time you eat something, especially with our American diet, where it's generally going to be higher in carbohydrates, you cause a spike in the hormone insulin, which is your storing hormone. And so really every time insulin is present, it makes it so that you can't tap into fat burning. So you're inherently going to be at a healthier weight just by not eating all throughout the day because you're not spiking your insulin.
So there are different ways to do this diet. So I do 16 hours off, 8 hours on. By the way, I put on weight with this diet. I lost weight with this diet. There's no perfect diet for me because when I first did it, I figured I only got 8 hours. Go hard or go home, right? So I ate enough for a few days just so I don't get hungry.
Just in case.
Yeah, and that's not the way to do it, okay? So you try to eat what you regularly would eat, but just condense it in that 8 hours.
Yes, and that is where, if I'm thinking of the same study as you are, where they said, they ate the same unhealthy diet and they still lost weight, I think that's where it took a wrong direction for intermittent fasting, where people thought, oh, I could have crackers and donuts and whatever I want all day and still lose weight, and I just eat during this 8-hour period. But then they get confused because they're still gaining weight, probably like what you said you experienced. Right. So it's, intermittent fasting is a tool. It's not a cure-all, but you still need to pay attention to what you're actually eating during that window, especially because you do want to try, even with the meals that you're eating, to keep insulin low. Because remember, that's the storing hormone. So if you are looking for weight loss, then you don't want to keep your insulin high.
We have the 16-8, which is what I do. What are some of the other versions of this that the audience could try?
There's a lot of different versions. The main ways that people will play around with it is the length of their fast. So in fact, I usually don't recommend to my clients right away to jump into a 16-hour fast, just because if you're not used to, fasting at all, if you're used to eating most hours of the day, then it's going to make it so that you have a really difficult transition. You're going to experience a lot of hunger, which I think most people can say they've experienced before. But I recommend, starting off with like a 12-hour fast, because that's where the benefits start to happen, is at 12 hours, and that's more reasonable. That could be 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And so just really playing with the window is one way to do it. Some people do 1 meal a day, and that's OMAD, and that's where you take all of your food for the day and put it into one meal. I'm not an advocate of that
15 minutes later, I'll be hungry. I've been full in my life like maybe once for 5 minutes. I'm hungry now, okay?
I'm not necessarily an advocate for OMAD, just because it takes away a lot of the cultural aspect of food. So breakfast is something that you don't necessarily eat with everyone. It's something that you have before you go to work. So that's easier to remove or to shift to later. Where lunch and dinner, those are more cultural types of meals and things that you're going to eat with people. And that's actually a really big aspect for health, keeping that cultural component. That's where that was something that was heavily influenced from the Mediterranean diet. They really emphasize the fact that eating and being with people when you eat is very important for your health, for just de-stressing, for feeling like you have this sense of community. That's been reiterated in the blue zones. It's just something that we forget that food is part of our culture, and so we need to make sure that we can still bring that in by having those 2 meals where you can actually eat with people.
In your opinion, the best schedule though for intermittent fasting is what?
So if you are already used to intermittent fasting, so if you've gone through that grace period of starting off with like 12 hours and then maybe shifting to 14, a lot of the benefits, especially for muscle gain, for longevity, are seen at that 8-hour eating window. So 16-8 is what it's commonly known as. But again, it also depends on your schedule. Even if you can get in a 14-hour fast, so you have that 10-hour eating window, then that's great. I never am an advocate for a strict, you need to have this 8-hour window, because if it doesn't fit for you, then it's just not going to work.
Okay, so I eat for 8 hours, and now I have this 16 hours of fasting, 24 hours in a day. See the math there? And okay, so that's right. I'm smart. I know it's 24 hours in a day. Okay, so with the 16 hours of fasting, I'm not allowed to eat anything in there, right?
It also depends on what you're going for. So again, we want to keep insulin really low. So most people will have, water, black coffee, tea, things that don't contain any type of calories whatsoever. But if you are still, especially for when you're a beginner, it can be hard to have that fasted period without anything. So having some amount of fat in order to keep your insulin low but still feel satiated can be helpful during the quote unquote fasted period. But like I said, it depends on your goal. So if weight loss and keeping insulin low is your goal, then including some type of fat during that portion, like, keto coffee is one, but including, like the grass-fed butter or coconut oil in your coffee or in your tea, which is something a lot of my clients do, does help to keep you satiated without stimulating your insulin.
So what exactly is the keto diet now? So
the keto diet is a really high-fat diet. It's been around a lot longer than people think, because it started, I believe it was in the 20s, could have been earlier than that actually, and it was to help kids with epilepsy. So they actually found that, when they were giving kids who had epileptic seizures the keto diet, that they had reduced rates of seizures.
Really?
Yeah, so that's where it really originated, and then people started to see, this is a whole history of nutrition where the U.S. went low fat for a long time, and they saw the rise in obesity, and they're like, hey, maybe fat is something that we actually need, so started to shift into incorporating fats again, and people started to realize, like, hey, keto diet actually can make it so that you're very satiated, because fat is very satiating, but then still be able to lose weight at the same time. I'm not necessarily an advocate for a keto diet either. I think it's really great for very particular situations. Like, there's some great research on cancer with keto diet, because you're depriving cancer cells of sugar, epilepsy, but for weight loss purposes, it can be hard to stick to long term.
So notice you just said something about sugar.
Yes.
So sugar is really the antichrist in terms of dieting.
It does spike your insulin, so that's something that's your storing hormone. So you want to, when it comes to dieting or weight loss, you do want to keep your insulin lower. So sugar is going to be the thing that really skyrockets it.
No, but notice you just said cancer, because I saw like video on Twitter where there was a doctor, and he was like, cancer loves sugar.
Yes.
So, and I've seen articles now saying that sugar is actually worse than alcohol. Who knew? I feel bad about myself now, but there's some sugar in it. Anyway, okay. So other than that, so sugar is really, really horrible.
Yeah, we eat a lot of refined sugar. That's the biggest issue. In fact, one of the leading causes of obesity in the U.S. are sugar-sweetened drinks. So, like, having some cocktails.
Every Tipsy bartender drink, but go on.
But mostly the biggest issue are things like sodas. That's what people are having consistently, having multiple drinks of throughout the day, and it's going to just flood your system of sugar without any type of buffer to reduce that uptake. Where, let's say, like an apple does have a fair amount of sugar in it, not as much as, multiple things of soda, but it still does have a good amount of sugar, but it also has fiber. And fiber is something that really slows down the release of the sugar into our system.
So you would not drink a soda?
I don't remember the last time I've had a soda.
Yeah, I don't remember the last time either. Well, in a drink, never mind. Okay, but I haven't had one by itself.
Yeah.
Okay? All right, so what about diet sodas?
Yeah, that's another one that was trying to remedy the solution because they're like, oh, it's 0 calories. So then that means that it's not going to cause us to gain weight. But there's actually a lot of research now that are showing it's changing the gut microbiome and causing there to be more bacteria that promotes obesity.
So diet sodas is just as bad.
Yeah, it's arguably worse.
You can't win, okay? Diet soda, regular soda. Okay, so no sodas. Okay, so going back to these high-fat diets, right? Like the keto diet. If you take in a lot of that fat, because this kind of a spinoff of Atkins, what you're saying,
totally. Yeah.
But a lot of doctors had issues with keto just because of they felt that it would have an adverse effect on the heart.
Heart disease.
Do you agree with that?
I don't, just because there's such an overwhelming amount of research that's showing that, first of all, in 2015, the Dietary Guidelines for America, which is the government's way of saying, like, these are the things that you need to eat and these are the things that we're focusing on, they came out saying that there's actually no relationship between the cholesterol that's in your food and the cholesterol that's in your blood. So you could eat a high cholesterol diet, but it actually will not necessarily mean that you're going to have high blood cholesterol. So it's not necessarily that fat is going to make you fat. Fat is going to cause heart disease, especially if you're having high quality fats. The issue comes with low quality fats. That's where a lot of the issues with fats come from. So this is really getting into more of the chemistry aspect, but the vegetable oils, for example, those are what's called polyunsaturated, which means that they just have a bunch of double bonds. That's what it means. And it means it's more prone to oxidation or becoming rancid. And that can cause a lot of inflammation in the body that can lead to heart disease. So it's really not the fat, but the types of fat that you need to look out for. I mean, I'm sure you're probably familiar with trans fats.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great example of how there's different types of fats and how some really can be helpful and some not so much.
Okay, so here's my question to you. I'm frying French fries. Yes, you shouldn't have French fries. But if I am, and I will make this as healthy as possible, don't use vegetable oil. What kind of oil should I use?
Yeah, you're frying or like baking? Or?
No, I'm frying. This straight up. This is America. I'm frying, deep frying.
Vegetable oils are going to be more prone to oxidation. So that's the biggest issue. So yeah, I mean, you want to have a more stable type of fat that isn't going to be as prone to oxidation. But in general, frying is a very oxidative process. If you were to bake, that'd be a lot better. You can still get it crispy.
Yeah, I know, but I'm frying though. Okay, so so bake it. Okay, so if I am gonna fry now, okay, I get it. I shouldn't fry. I need to bake. The bake is broken though. Okay, what kind of oil should I have?
This is a very unique situation. The oven's done.
Yeah.
So you want more of the saturated types of fats for that. So the saturated fats, animal-based fats, those are going to be less prone to oxidation, so less rancid causing.
Here's a question for you. What's more important, eating healthy or working out, if you can do both?
Eating healthy.
Okay.
100%. Yeah, working out, there's a lot of studies that show that it's really great for you, that it helps to just improve your cardiovascular system. But especially for weight loss purposes, nutrition is going to be the thing that, is the pillar of what you need to address first. So if you had to choose one or the other, ideally you want some amount of both, even if you could just walk. But nutrition is going to be the thing that helps with your health goals the most.
Okay. Wrapping this up. When we drink our alcohol, keep it simple.
Yes.
A glass of red wine. Or if just have the liquor with soda water or something. Don't bring in all the mixes, all the sugars and simple syrups and all that sort of stuff. Keep your drinks boring, okay? If you want to live longer, you understand me, okay? You will still be drunk, okay? And happy at the end, okay? You just might not enjoy the ride getting there as much, all right? Is this clear? Tell them how to find you.
I have my own YouTube channel where I do talk a lot about intermittent fasting. So it's just Autumn Bates, my name. And seriously, like every single question you could have about intermittent fasting, I have 100+ videos on there.
Yeah, she tells you how you can if you ways that you mess it up and how to avoid that. And
yeah, troubleshooting. I also have an intermittent fasting program that tells you more step by step on how to go about it. That's been really successful with all my AM peeps. So so really YouTube and the programs are the biggest ways to go about it.
So you like intermittent fasting pretty much above a lot of other diets, but I mean you could be keto and intermittent at the same time.
Intermittent fasting isn't really like a quote unquote diet.
Yeah.
It's more just an eating schedule, and I'm really big on the gut health. And if you're constantly eating, it just means that you're not giving your gut any rest. And that's where a lot of issues like bloating can come in, or we were talking about SIBO earlier. SIBO can be caused as well from eating too consistently and having high levels of stress as well. So I really focus on gut healing, and intermittent fasting is a really great tool for that.
Yeah. So please go check her out, and thank you for coming through.
Of course,
okay?
Thank you.
Appreciate this. All right. And sorry about the sugar. We can get you just a shot of vodka next time. All right. Stay tipsy, friends. Stay tipsy, and go follow her, please.